She was the woman everyone trusted, but behind closed doors, she hid a secret so dark it could destroy everything. What could make a seemingly perfect life spiral into fear and betrayal overnight? Tonight, one hidden truth will surface, and nothing will ever be the same. The town woke the same way every morning, with light slipping over porches and the hum of distant traffic settling into routine. In Alabama, mornings carried memory, and people trusted what felt familiar. They trusted her. She waved from the driveway, returned borrowed dishes, remembered birthdays. She taught Sunday see-you smiles and weekday patience. No one noticed how carefully she kept her voice even, how she measured every word like glass. Her name moved easily through conversations, spoken with approval at grocery counters and school gates. She had the face of someone who listened. When neighbors spoke, she nodded, absorbing their worries as if they were light burdens. At home, she lined shoes precisely by the door and folded laundry until the creases aligned. Control was comfort. Silence was safety. She told herself this as she watered the azaleas, counting seconds between breaths. The house held a steady quiet. Her husband left early, kissed her cheek, asked about dinner. She answered without thinking because answers had become habits. Their marriage was a calm surface, polished and reflective, hiding depth beneath. She loved him in the way one loves a shore, reliable, unmoving. Love did not ask questions. Love did not open locked rooms. By afternoon, clouds gathered low, heavy with the promise of rain. She drove across town, returning library books, smiling at a clerk who thanked her by name. The radio murmured a local update, voices blending into background noise. At a stoplight, her phone vibrated once, then stilled. She did not look. Waiting felt safer than knowing. Evening brought thunder and the smell of wet earth. She cooked, cleaned, set the table, performed the choreography of a trusted life. When night finally settled, she sat alone on the couch, the television dark, the house listening. The phone vibrated again. This time it kept vibrating, patient and insistent. She answered on the third buzz, stepping into the hallway as if distance could soften sound. The voicemail icon blinked. She pressed play, then froze. A man's voice, older now, careful and unmistakable, spoke her name like a confession. He referenced a summer she had erased, a promise she had broken, a truth she had buried for survival. He said he was back. He said they needed to talk. Her hands shook. She ended the message, stared at the wall, and felt years compress into seconds. Rain hammered the roof. The hallway seemed narrower. She deleted the voicemail, emptied the trash, deleted it again, and leaned her forehead against the cool paint. From the living room, her phone chimed once more. A new message arrived, this time with a single photograph attached. She hesitated before opening it, heart thudding with a rhythm she recognized too well. The image loaded slowly, revealing a sunlit riverbank, a familiar curve of water, a shadow cast at the edge. Nothing explicit, nothing illegal, just context sharpened into threat. Her reflection ghosted across the screen, older, thinner, afraid. She locked the phone, unlocked it, locked it again, as if repetition could undo evidence. Somewhere a car passed, tires hissing on wet asphalt. The house creaked, settling around her like a witness choosing silence. She whispered a name she never used aloud and felt the word bruise her mouth. Tomorrow, she promised herself, she would decide what to do. Tonight, she would sleep. Yet as she turned off the hallway light, another vibration followed, softer this time, like a knock from inside her chest. It carried a simple line beneath the image, confirming the past was awake, watching, and patient, ready to change everything after dawn tomorrow morning. The morning arrived without relief. She woke before the alarm, heart already racing, as if her body had never slept at all. The voicemail was gone, the photo still burned behind her eyes. She moved through the house quietly, careful not to wake her husband, careful not to disturb the illusion that yesterday still existed. In the bathroom mirror, she studied her face the way investigators studied crime scenes. There were no obvious signs, no visible fractures, only faint shadows beneath her eyes. She splashed water, steadied her breathing, and repeated the same lie she had practiced for years. It's over, it's gone, it can't hurt you now. But the past had a way of ignoring permission. As she poured coffee, memory seeped in uninvited. A different version of herself stood in the heat of an Alabama summer, younger, reckless, hungry for escape. Back then, secrecy felt romantic. Silence felt powerful. She remembered promises whispered like protection, how truth had seemed negotiable, flexible, something that could be reshaped to fit survival. Her phone lay face down on the counter. She did not touch it. Instead, she folded herself into routine. Breakfast dishes, Laundry, a polite text to her sister. Normalcy became armor, yet every sound carried weight. Every car passing the house felt intentional. By noon, the first letter arrived. It was not in the mailbox, but slipped beneath the front door, careful and deliberate. She stared at the envelope for a long time before bending to pick it up. No return address. Her name written in block letters, firm and unfamiliar. The paper trembled in her hands as she opened it. Inside was a single sentence. We should have ended this the right way. The room seemed to tilt. Her chest tightened, breath shallow and uneven. He had crossed a line she never imagined he would cross. The past was no longer calling from a distance. It was standing at her door. She sat on the floor, back against the couch, clutching the letter like evidence. Dialogue replayed in her mind, arguments from years ago, half-finished confessions, the moment she chose silence over consequence. She had believed burying the truth would protect everyone. Instead, it had given it roots. That afternoon, she drove without direction, the Alabama roads stretching long and empty ahead of her. Fields blurred by, familiar landmarks turned foreign. At a stoplight, her phone vibrated again. This time, she answered. There was a pause on the line, heavy and intentional. Then his voice returned, calm, controlled, carrying history between every word. He did not apologize, he did not threaten. He spoke as if they were simply resuming a conversation paused years ago. He said he needed closure. He said secrets rot when left alone. She ended the call without responding. By evening, the weight of it pressed deeper. She hid the letter beneath folded sweaters, locked the door twice, checked the windows. Her husband asked if she was all right. She smiled and said she was tired. The lie slid out effortlessly, practiced and clean. That night, sleep refused to come. She lay awake, staring into darkness, listening to the house breathe. Somewhere across town, a man who knew her truth was awake too. And for the first time, she understood something terrifying. The past was not asking to be remembered. It was demanding to be acknowledged. And tomorrow, she would have to face the man who should never have come back. Outside, rain returned softly, tapping windows like a warning, reminding her that buried things always surface. And when they do, they never come alone again. She saw him before he saw her, standing across the street like a memory that had learned to breathe. The rain from the night before clung to the pavement, turning the morning light dull and metallic. She had told herself she would be prepared, that seeing him again would feel distant, controlled. Instead, her chest tightened and time folded inward. He looked older, leaner, his hair touched with gray, but the posture was the same. Calm, waiting, as if he knew she would come, as if this meeting had always been inevitable. She considered turning back, driving away, pretending she never received the letter. But avoidance had already failed her once. They met in a small cafe on the edge of town, a place forgotten by progress. The bell above the door rang softly as she entered. He did not stand. He only watched her approach, eyes steady, unreadable. She sat opposite him, hands folded tightly in her lap, afraid they might shake. "You look well," he said quietly. The words unsettled her more than anger would have. She answered with a nod, refusing to offer comfort. Silence stretched between them, thick with years unspoken. Around them, cups clinked, a waitress laughed, life continued without awareness. He spoke first, as he always had. He talked about being back in Alabama, about unfinished things. He said her name again, carefully, as if testing whether it still belonged to him. She listened, numb, while narration filled the gaps he avoided. He never mentioned why he left. He never acknowledged what she lost. She finally spoke, voice low and controlled. She told him he should not have come back. That whatever they were was over. That her life was different now. The words sounded rehearsed, hollow even to her own ears. He leaned forward slightly. "Different doesn't mean honest," he said. The sentence landed with precision. He knew exactly where to press. She felt exposed, as though the cafe walls had dissolved. She remembered how he once framed lies as protection, how he convinced her silence was an act of love. Power had always disguised itself as concern. He slid something across the table. Another photograph, this one clearer. A moment frozen that could not be explained away. Her pulse roared in her ears. She did not touch it. "I'm not here to destroy you," he said. "I just want the truth acknowledged." The irony almost made her laugh. She stood abruptly, chair scraping the floor. Heads turned, she didn't care. She told him never to contact her again. That if he did, she would tell her husband everything. It was a threat she hoped sounded real. As she walked out, she felt his certainty behind her, unshaken. Outside, the air was thick, pressing against her skin. She sat in her car, hands gripping the steering wheel, breathing through waves of panic. The encounter had confirmed what she feared most. He wasn't chasing closure. He was reclaiming control. On the drive home, memories attacked without mercy. Late-night calls, hidden meetings, the moment she realized love had turned into leverage. She wondered how many choices were truly hers and how many had been carefully guided. Each mile closer to home felt heavier, like approaching a verdict already decided. When she returned home, her husband's car was already in the driveway, earlier than usual. Her stomach dropped. Inside, he sat at the table, her phone in his hand. He looked up slowly, confusion etched across his face. "Who is this man?" he asked. "And why does he know things about you I don't?" The question hung between them, heavy and irreversible, as the last safe version of her life quietly disappeared forever. She realized in that moment that silence was no longer protection, but a weapon turned inward, and whatever she said next would decide who survived the truth when morning demanded answers from her. She stood in the doorway, her husband's question still echoing between them. The house felt smaller now, its walls pressing inward, holding breath. He waited, phone resting on the table like a quiet accusation. She crossed the room slowly, each step measured, as though speed might shatter something fragile beyond repair. They sat across from one another, married years yet suddenly strangers. He asked again, softer this time, not angry but wounded. Who was he and why did he sound familiar? She opened her mouth, closed it, felt the old instinct rise, protect, deflect, survive. Silence had always been easier than truth. She told him part of it, not enough to explain, just enough to calm. An old acquaintance, she said, someone confused, someone who should have stayed gone. The lie slid between them, practiced and smooth. He nodded, but his eyes searched her face, looking for fractures she tried to hide. Their marriage had always been built this way, on quiet understandings and unasked questions. He was steady, reliable, a man who believed in forward motion. She loved him for that, for the safety of predictability, but safety required maintenance. It demanded omission, careful editing of the past. That night they moved around each other gently, cautious as if any sudden movement might trigger collapse. Dialogue thinned into routine questions. Did she lock the door? Was the alarm set? He reached for her hand in bed, fingers warm, trusting. Guilt curled tight in her chest, sharp and breathless. Sleep came in fragments. She dreamed of closed rooms and muffled voices, of truths pounding from behind walls. Morning arrived heavy and gray. At breakfast, her husband watched her carefully, noticing the tremor in her hands, the way she avoided his eyes. Silence stretched again, but now it felt dangerous. She left the house early, claiming errands. The town greeted her with familiar smiles, unaware of the fracture beneath her skin. She felt watched, not by him alone, but by the life she had built. Every lie had weight. Every secret demanded loyalty. By afternoon, she understood something she had avoided for years. Her marriage survived because of what she never said. And now, the truth threatened not just her safety, but his innocence. Protecting him meant continuing the lie. Telling him meant destruction. Her phone vibrated once, then stopped. She stared at it, knowing without looking who it would be. Control slipped, replaced by inevitability. She realized silence was no longer neutral. It was choosing sides. When she returned home, dusk had settled. Her husband asked nothing, but his distance spoke. She stood alone in the kitchen, hands braced against the counter, breathing through fear. Tomorrow she would have to confront what she had buried. And somewhere a man from her past was waiting, patient, certain she would eventually break. The marriage she protected with silence now demanded a price. As night fell, she understood the cruel truth: secrets do not disappear. They grow, pressing outward, until they force confession. And the man who should not be back had already begun tearing at the foundation of everything she had sworn to protect. She turned off the lights, leaving the kitchen in shadow. Upstairs, her husband waited in silence. Outside, a car slowed near the house, then stopped. She froze, heart pounding, knowing the past was no longer content to whisper. It was coming closer, ready to speak aloud, and when it did, nothing built on silence would survive the sound of truth finally spoken without mercy in the days ahead for them, all soon, now very near ahead, fast approaching as consequences gathered. Unseen, but inevitable. She closed the door softly, as if gentleness could delay impact. In the quiet, she sensed the next chapter forming, waiting for daylight and courage, when confrontation would replace avoidance, and the man from the cafe would step fully into her life, uninvited, unavoidable. She knew he would reach out again. The certainty settled over her like humidity, thick and unavoidable. The silence after the parked car, after the unspoken threat, was not peace. It was preparation. By mid-morning, her phone vibrated, a single message lighting the screen. No greeting, just a location and a time. She told herself she didn't have to go. Yet an hour later, she was driving toward the outskirts of town, where abandoned buildings leaned into memory. The place he chose was deliberate, neutral ground disguised as nostalgia. A closed-down riverside park. Sunlight filtered through trees, dappling the cracked pavement. He was already there, seated on a bench, hands folded, posture relaxed. The confidence unsettled her more than anger would have. He greeted her as if they were old friends, as if nothing had been broken between them. She remained standing, keeping distance, crossing her arms like armor. "I asked you not to contact me," she said. He smiled faintly. "You always say that when you're afraid." The words cut cleanly. He spoke with the intimacy of someone who remembered her before restraint. He talked about their past carefully, selecting moments that softened edges, turning damage into romance. He framed manipulation as devotion, secrecy as sacrifice. Listening felt like being rewritten. She accused him of intrusion, of cruelty. He did not deny it. Instead, he spoke of consequences, of how truth would unravel more than just her life. Her husband's name entered the conversation quietly, deliberately. He never threatened outright. He didn't have to. "You chose silence," he said. "I just lived with it." The blame shifted with practiced ease. She felt herself shrinking, doubting, replaying decisions she once believed necessary. Love, once intense and consuming, now revealed its final form: leverage. He knew which memories weakened her, which fears ruled her. He had learned her vulnerabilities before she understood they existed. She tried to leave. He stood then, blocking her path without touching her. The proximity tightened her chest. He lowered his voice, spoke of evidence, of people who would ask questions. He reminded her how easily stories could be interpreted once released. Her phone buzzed, a message from her husband asking when she'd be home. The timing felt cruel. She realized the choice before her was no longer about honesty, but damage control. Protect the present or confront the past and lose everything. "I won't be controlled," she said, though her voice trembled. He stepped back, allowing space, a calculated retreat. "I don't need to control you," he replied. "You will do what you always do. You'll protect what you love." She left without another word, shame and fury tangling in her chest. On the drive back, her reflection in the rearview mirror looked unfamiliar, fragmented. She wondered when love had first turned conditional, when affection began demanding obedience. At home, she found her husband in the yard, trimming hedges, ordinary and unaware. The sight nearly broke her. She imagined the truth spilling out, imagined his face changing. The cost felt unbearable. Silence pressed in again, tempting and familiar. That night she lay awake, heart pounding, phone clenched in her hand. She understood now that love was no longer refuge. It was currency, and someone else was spending it on her behalf. Just before dawn, another message arrived. A single line, calm and confident, promising the next step. She stared at the screen, knowing the game had begun and that someone else was already watching, closer than she realized, waiting to see which version of her would finally choose survival over truth. Somewhere beyond the trees, tires crunched on gravel, then stopped. She felt eyes on the house, patient and curious. Tomorrow would bring pressure, not from him alone. Others would ask questions, notice patterns, connect pieces. Love had opened the door. Power was stepping through, and she knew resistance would cost more than surrender ever had. Morning light exposed what night had hidden. She moved through the house as if through evidence, careful not to disturb anything that might collapse under scrutiny. Her husband had already left for work, a quiet mercy. The space he left behind felt louder than presence, filled with questions he had not yet asked. Outside, the town carried on, unaware and observant all at once. Neighbors waved. Cars passed. The world kept its rhythm, but she felt out of step, as though everyone else had been given a script she no longer possessed. Secrets had weight, she realized, and she was carrying too many at once. She spent the morning erasing traces. Old emails, hidden folders, call logs. Each deletion felt like a confession whispered into a void that refused to answer back. Control had once been her strength. Now it felt frantic, reactive. The past was not disappearing, it was resisting. By afternoon, whispers reached her indirectly. A cashier lingered too long on pleasantries. A neighbor asked an unnecessary question about her husband's schedule. Nothing concrete, nothing accusatory, but curiosity had shifted tone. The town was beginning to notice patterns. Silence, she learned, attracts attention when it lingers too long. Her phone remained quiet, which frightened her more than contact ever had. She expected him to push to tighten his grip. Instead, absence stretched, deliberate and strategic. She understood then that pressure did not always announce itself. Sometimes it waited. At home, she found the missing object she hadn't realized was gone. A small box tucked deep in the closet, no longer where she left it. Her breath caught. Inside had been fragments of a former life she kept not for sentiment but insurance. Proof that stories had more than one author. Now it was gone. Panic surged, sharp and dizzying. She searched the house, every drawer, every shelf, knowing it was useless. Someone had been inside her private world, rearranging power. The violation felt intimate, personal. Keeping secrets had required trust. Trust had been misplaced. That evening, her husband returned with unfamiliar quiet. He kissed her cheek, but the warmth felt distant. Over dinner, he asked careful questions, framed as concern. She answered selectively, performing normalcy with exhausting precision. The lie demanded more detail now, more effort. It was evolving. Later, alone in the bathroom, she stared at herself, hands gripping the sink. She barely recognized the woman reflected back. This was the cost she had ignored. Anxiety etched into posture, fear embedded in routine. Protecting the truth had required sacrificing peace. Her phone finally vibrated near midnight. A single image arrived. The missing box photographed, contents laid out neatly, intentionally. No message followed. None was needed. The balance had shifted completely. She sank onto the bed, heart racing, realization settling heavy and final. Secrets were no longer something she controlled. They were currency in someone else's hands. Every choice she made now would be measured against exposure. Outside, a distant siren cut through the night, brief but unsettling. She wondered if it was coincidence or warning. Sleep felt impossible. Tomorrow would bring escalation. She sensed it in the air, the tightening circle, the sense that others were moving closer to the truth. As she turned off the lamp, darkness closed in, thick and absolute. She understood now that keeping secrets did not prevent damage. It delayed it, magnified it, sharpened the eventual impact. And when the truth finally demanded payment, it would not accept installments. Somewhere beyond her walls, someone else was preparing their next move. And soon, she would not be the only one forced to choose between confession and consequence. The next day began with a knock she did not expect. Not loud, not urgent, but deliberate. She froze in the kitchen, coffee cooling in her hands, heart racing as if it already knew who stood on the other side. When she opened the door, she found a familiar face, one she had never considered dangerous. It was her sister. She stood on the porch holding a folded newspaper, eyes narrowed with concern rather than accusation. She said she was in the neighborhood, that she wanted to check in. The lie was gentle but unnecessary. Something had already shifted. The town's curiosity had reached blood. They sat at the table where silence had learned to live. Her sister spoke carefully, mentioning rumors without naming them, questions without asking directly. She had always been observant, the kind of person who noticed changes in tone, posture, absence. She had noticed her long before anyone else had. "You don't seem like yourself," her sister said softly. The words broke through her defenses. For a moment, she considered telling everything. The urge rose sharp and sudden, driven by exhaustion more than courage. But confession required trust, and trust had become fragile. She offered partial truth instead, vague references to stress, to old issues resurfacing. Her sister listened, but her eyes did not relax. She reached into her bag and placed something on the table, a photograph, not one the man had sent. This one was older, grainy, taken years ago at the edge of town. It showed her car and another man beside it. "I found this," her sister said. "Someone left it on my windshield." The room seemed to tilt. Her mouth went dry. The past was no longer circling quietly. It was recruiting witnesses. They spoke in low voices then, dialogue heavy with implication. Her sister asked questions that cut closer to truth than comfort. Not accusations, but concerns sharpened by instinct. She realized with dread that even without full context, the image told enough. Stories write themselves once evidence exists. After her sister left, promising to return, she sat alone for a long time. The house no longer felt like shelter. It felt transparent. The secret she guarded had multiplied, moving outward, infecting relationships she never intended to touch. That afternoon, a car slowed outside the house again. She watched from behind the curtain, breath shallow. It didn't stop this time. It passed slowly, deliberately. A reminder. Control was no longer centralized. Too many people were holding pieces now. Her phone rang just after sunset. An unfamiliar number. She answered without greeting. A woman's voice spoke, calm, professional. She introduced herself as someone asking questions about a past incident. Not an accusation, not yet, just verification. Her name had come up. A witness had mentioned it. Her chest tightened. She answered carefully, choosing words like stepping stones across deep water. The call ended politely. But the damage was done. The truth had a witness now, possibly more than one. When her husband came home, she studied his face for signs she might have missed before. Trust was still there, but thinner, stretched. He asked about her day. She answered, he nodded. Neither believed the exchange meant anything anymore. That night she packed a small bag without knowing why. Instinct, perhaps. Preparation. She hid it beneath the bed, heart pounding with the knowledge that running only mattered before doors closed. As she turned off the light, her phone vibrated again. A message from him, short, confident. They're asking questions. We should talk. She stared at the screen, realizing the truth was no longer just between them. Others were listening now, watching, remembering. And once truth gains witnesses, silence loses its power. Outside, distant headlights swept across the walls, briefly illuminating the room like an interrogation lamp. She knew the next chapter would not be private. It would be public. And whatever happened next would change not just her life, but everyone caught in the widening circle closing in fast. Morning arrived with a dull, oppressive light, heavy with the knowledge that nothing would feel the same again. She sat at the kitchen table, staring at the coffee cup she hadn't touched. The photograph her sister had shown her, the messages, the unknown calls, they all converged into a single, undeniable truth. The past was no longer a shadow. It was here, breathing, tangible, relentless. Her husband moved through the house, unaware that his entire perception of their life was about to fracture. He asked routine questions about breakfast, about errands, about whether she remembered to lock the doors. She answered automatically, each word a practiced shield. But she felt as if she were acting in a play where everyone else knew the script except her. By late morning, the man from the cafe appeared again. She did not know how he had found her, but there he was, standing at the edge of the driveway, calm and unhurried. Her heart thumped violently as she stepped outside. He didn't speak immediately. Instead, he watched her with the same precise patience that had made silence so dangerous before. "I told you this wouldn't stay buried," he said finally. His voice carried the weight of history, and every word landed with deliberate impact. She felt her control slipping, the careful walls of routine cracking under the pressure. She argued, pleaded, tried to maintain distance. "Why are you here again?" she demanded, voice shaky but loud enough to echo against the empty street. "Because it needs to end," he replied simply. "Not because I want to hurt you, because if it doesn't, everyone around you will suffer." The words twisted inside her, revealing their true meaning. Her choices, once framed as protection, as survival, had consequences, and those consequences were no longer hypothetical. They had arrived. Inside, her husband's movement drew her attention. He had come out to see who was at the door, curiosity painted across his face. Their eyes met for a brief, terrifying moment. She realized the exposure was complete. The secret she had guarded with every ounce of energy was on the verge of unraveling entirely. She felt panic claw at her chest. Memories rushed unbidden, late-night conversations, whispered confessions, promises never spoken aloud. Everything she had believed about control, about the illusion of safety, collapsed. She understood then, in a clarity both frightening and liberating, that nothing would ever be the same. The man stepped closer, but not threateningly. "You can't fix this by hiding anymore," he said. "The truth will come out, it always does." She wanted to run, to erase the moment, to rewind everything. But instinct held her in place. The air seemed to pulse with inevitability. She realized that the life she had lived, the life of measured steps and hidden lies, had ended. Her phone buzzed. Another message. This time not from him, not from a stranger, but from someone else connected to her past. Someone whose observation had been silent until now. The text was short, chilling in its simplicity. "We know. Meet us." She glanced at her husband, who was still watching, oblivious to the layers of tension she could feel pressing in from all sides. Fear, guilt, and anticipation combined, coiling tight in her stomach. By evening, the rain began again, a steady drum against the roof. The past, the present, and the people she had tried to shield all seemed to converge into a single point, a confrontation that could no longer be avoided. As she locked the doors and drew the curtains, she understood fully that everything had changed after today. Tomorrow would not offer safety or denials. The past had caught up, witnesses existed, and decisions would have to be made. The world she had curated through silence and secrecy was gone, leaving only the raw edges of truth waiting to cut through everything she had built. She sat alone in the dark, heart pounding, knowing that the next encounter, the one that would demand answers, confessions, and action, was imminent. And when it came, there would be no going back. The day began gray and oppressive, the kind of light that made shadows cling to corners and memories sharper than reality. She moved through the house with mechanical precision, preparing breakfast, setting the table, keeping herself busy. Every gesture was a rehearsal, an attempt to maintain normalcy as the weight of exposure pressed closer. The man from the past had made one thing painfully clear. The truth was no longer hers alone. Her husband arrived at the kitchen table, coffee steaming between his hands. He smiled faintly, unaware of the storm swirling just beneath her skin. She returned the gesture, but it felt hollow, performed. Silence hung between them, taut with questions he could not yet ask. The photograph, the messages, the unexpected witness. The sum of all these fragments loomed over her like a storm cloud. Each secret she had kept, every omission, every lie, had been intended to protect those she loved. Her husband, her sister, the people in town, none of them had deserved the chaos that truth could unleash. She had thought shielding them was enough. She had been wrong. She found herself replaying the past, the choices she had made. The lie she had told him that night, the half-truths, the careful omissions, each had been a shield. She had wrapped love in deception, reasoning that protection justified manipulation. But now she realized the shield had cracks. Evidence existed, witnesses existed. The lie was no longer a tool. It had become fragile, dangerous, and inadequate. The man arrived again, unannounced, as if he had become a shadow embedded in the rhythm of her life. She met him in the garage, where light was muted and the air smelled of oil and dust. Dialogue was short, precise, heavy with accusation and warning. "It's too late to pretend," he said. "The pieces are moving themselves." She clenched her fists, angry, terrified, cornered. She tried to explain herself, to frame her silence as necessity, as protection. She reminded him that her decisions had spared pain, had prevented suffering. For a brief moment, she thought she saw understanding flicker in his eyes, but it disappeared quickly. He only shook his head. Protection was never as simple as she had imagined. Returning inside, she found her husband in the living room, watching television with the remote slack in his hand. He asked nothing, unaware that the calm surface of their marriage had cracked irreversibly. She realized then that the lie had preserved appearances, yes, but at the cost of trust. Everything she had tried to protect now teetered on the edge. The day stretched forward with tension in every gesture, every glance, every sound. She noticed the smallest details, the way the wind rattled the blinds, the echo of footsteps outside the door, the pattern of messages that could not be ignored. Each small signal reminded her that secrecy no longer equaled safety. As night fell, she stood by the window watching shadows move across the yard. She thought about the people she had tried to shield, the illusions she had maintained, and the inevitability of truth. The lie that had once seemed noble now felt like a fragile raft in a dark, rising current, threatening to sink at any moment. Her phone vibrated, a single message appearing. "It's time. Decide who you protect." She froze. The weight of responsibility pressed down. The lie had kept pain at bay for years, but it could not stop what was coming. Choices had to be made. The next day, the confrontation would demand more than evasions. It would demand clarity, loyalty, and a reckoning with every hidden truth she had carried so carefully. Outside, a lone car passed, headlights cutting through darkness like judgment. She understood fully and irrevocably that protection had its cost, and that cost was about to be collected from everyone she had ever tried to save. The morning arrived harsh and unyielding, sunlight slicing through blinds like accusation. She moved through the house with careful precision, knowing every action would be scrutinized, not by strangers, but by those she loved most. The man from her past had left a message. "It's time. No more delays." The weight of inevitability pressed down, making her limbs heavy and decisions sharper than knives. Her husband, sensing tension, tried normal conversation, but the questions remained unspoken, lingering like smoke. She answered mechanically, aware that every word carried potential consequences. Trust, once assumed, had evaporated. The foundation of their life trembled with the weight of what she had hidden. By mid-morning, the confrontation began. He appeared at the door, calm, confident, eyes scanning, assessing. She let him in, though every instinct screamed to close the door, to barricade the truth inside. Dialogue became a weapon, each carefully chosen word carrying hidden meanings. His voice was calm, almost clinical, but it cut deep. "You can't undo what's been set in motion," he said. "Every choice has a consequence, and it's time to pay." She felt panic surge, but restrained it. Years of concealment had taught her the art of composure under pressure. She realized that judgment had already begun, not from law or town, but from the truth itself. Evidence, witnesses, history, they demanded accountability, and no performance could shield her anymore. Her husband finally confronted her, asking the questions she had avoided for so long. His voice was measured, but pain laced every syllable. She answered not fully, but enough to fracture the illusions they had both clung to. His expression shifted, disbelief, anger, sorrow, a storm contained in a single moment. Outside, the world seemed indifferent. Cars passed, neighbors went about routines, oblivious to the personal reckoning unfolding behind the closed doors. Inside, time slowed, every heartbeat exaggerated, every glance a verdict. The house felt smaller, suffocating under the intensity of accumulated truths. The man from her past watched silently as she attempted to navigate the delicate balance of confession and self-preservation. He did not intervene. His role was observation, a reminder that silence could no longer serve as protection. The power she had once wielded through secrecy had evaporated, leaving her exposed. As the hours stretched, confrontation became inevitable. Arguments escalated, voices trembled, accusations surfaced, and emotional rawness replaced all pretenses. The lie that had safeguarded relationships now betrayed them, exposing vulnerabilities she had fought to conceal. Each revelation struck with merciless clarity. By evening, judgment had run its course. There were no winners, only survivors rearranging the shards of trust. Her husband retreated to another room, weary and shaken. She sank into a chair, drained but alert, knowing that consequences had been exacted without delay or mercy. The final message arrived, silent and succinct. The next step is irreversible. She stared at the screen, understanding fully that the reckoning was not over. Decisions made today would ripple into tomorrow, shaping lives in ways she could no longer control. Outside, the wind rattled the windows, carrying a chill that mirrored the emptiness inside. She realized that judgment had no compassion, no negotiation. It demanded acknowledgement, truth, and sometimes suffering. And in that moment, she understood that what she faced next, the final confrontation, would determine not just survival, but whether redemption was ever possible for a life built on secrets. The night settled heavy, silence pressing against the walls. She knew the final chapter was coming, and when it did, there would be no retreat, no mitigation, no mercy, only the full cost of every truth she had ever concealed. The house was quiet, almost unbearably so, as if it were holding its breath. She sat in the living room, the remnants of confrontation from the day before scattered around her. Cups left half full, a chair tipped slightly, the faint smell of coffee lingering like a stubborn memory. Each object reminded her that nothing returned to its previous order once the truth had been spoken. Her husband remained in the bedroom, silent but present, the distance between them palpable. No words could bridge the space, no explanations could undo the fractures. She understood now that truth did not merely reveal. It demanded accountability, reshaping lives and exposing vulnerabilities in ways lies never could. Every choice she had made, every secret she had kept to protect those she loved, had a cost far greater than she had imagined. The man from her past waited, as always, outside the boundaries of her home, patient, observing, a living reminder that the past never truly dies. His presence was less threatening now, more a statement of fact. Some truths cannot be contained. She thought about the letters, the photographs, the messages, the witnesses, each a thread pulled from the fabric of her life, unraveling what she had fought so desperately to maintain. She recalled the moments of compromise, the quiet rationalizations, the careful lies that had seemed necessary at the time. They had protected her husband from pain, her family from scandal, and herself from judgment. And yet, standing here in the aftermath, she realized that protection was only partial, an illusion. When the truth arrives, it does not choose sides. It simply unfolds, and everyone in its path must pay attention or pay a price. Her husband emerged from the bedroom, face drawn and eyes hollow from sleepless nights and lingering doubt. No accusation, no questions, only the weight of understanding settling heavily between them. She met his gaze, and in that silent exchange, both recognized the irreversibility of the events. They had crossed a threshold. There was no turning back. Outside, rain began again, soft at first, then heavier, drumming against the roof and windows like a relentless reminder of consequence. She watched it fall, feeling the chill penetrate the room and her very bones. The weather mirrored her own internal reckoning, washing over the past and refusing to let it remain hidden. Alone for a moment, she considered the true scope of what had transpired. Emotional manipulation, secrecy, betrayal. Each had shaped not only her actions, but the reactions of everyone around her. The town's curiosity, the witnesses' involvement, the man's return, her husband's confrontation, all threads weaving a tapestry she could neither undo nor control. Truth had a cost, and it was measured not in absolution, but in the fractures left behind. Her phone vibrated one final time, a simple message blinking across the screen. Decisions have consequences. Choose carefully from now on. She understood immediately that this was not a threat. It was fact. A recognition that life, after exposure, moves in unalterable lines, forcing acknowledgement of every hidden choice, every unspoken word. That night she walked through the empty house, touching surfaces as if seeking comfort in the tangible. The rooms felt smaller, not because of space, but because of the weight of reality pressing down. She understood that living with truth required constant vigilance, courage, and acceptance of discomfort. Secrets had offered a temporary refuge. Truth offered clarity, but it demanded a price few were willing to pay. As she gazed out the window at the darkened street, she realized the most dangerous revelations were not the ones others might uncover, but the ones she carried herself. Her reflection in the glass seemed like a stranger, older, more fragile, yet undeniably wiser. She had survived, but survival had a cost measured in trust lost, innocence shattered, and a life forever altered by choices made in the name of protection. The final lesson pressed upon her like the heavy night itself. Truth is unyielding, impartial, and consuming. It does not forgive, it does not wait. And while it can release burdens, it also exposes every vulnerability, every consequence, every fracture left in its wake. She understood fully in the marrow of her bones that the price of honesty is never partial. It is absolute. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying distant echoes of lives touched by her secrets, of judgments made in silence, of stories that would outlast her alone. She turned back into the house, closed the door firmly, and allowed herself a single deep breath. Everything had changed. Everything would continue to change, and now she knew what truth really costs.